8.
You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So this young girl goes to her grandfather, who's this tough old cowboy at like 97 years old, and asks him for his secret to such a long life. And he told her that the secret is that he sprinkles just a little bit of gunpowder on his oatmeal every morning. Well, granddaughter took that to heart and started doing just that, putting a little bit of gunpowder on her oatmeal every morning. And she went on and lived to 103 years old. And when she died, she left behind 14 children, 30 grandchildren, 45 great-grandchildren, another 25 great-great-grandchildren, and a 40-foot hole where the crematorium used to be. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. We've got a good lineup for you today. After the show at 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, will be Comic Collectibles with Rex and John. Then we've got Talk and Treat Trivia. We've got
that would be 360 Comics.
360's Comics. For some reason, I thought the Comic Beardies were on tonight, but they're actually on tomorrow night. So,
Correct.
Yeah. Just had a whole lot of weird things going on in my brain all of a sudden. Hey to everybody here. We got Triple B, we got Cool, and we got Kenneth. I always feel weird starting the show without Ed. Just seems like Ed should be here, you know? We got JD on the boards catching me up. And we've got a lot of news to cover. And then we're going to talk about the rumors about Anna Taylor-Joy. But let's get into the news. The first thing, of course, is today is the start of the Jonathan Majors trial. He is, of course, being accused of physical assault against Grace Jabari, his one-time girlfriend. If he's convicted, he could serve up to a year in prison. There are 4 counts against him. He arrived this morning in the Manhattan courthouse along with his girlfriend, Megan Good, who you know from the Shazam movies. She plays the grown-up version of Darla. While in court, though, the judge, basically Judge Gaffey, had to hear a series of motions this morning. One of which had to do with jury selection. And there's a term for it, and I don't remember what it is now. But during jury selections, one of the things they discussed was how Jabari or Majors could be referred, and neither one of them can be referred to as a victim by prosecutors or defense in jury selection. Another thing they had to figure out was whether or not basically Majors counter complained against Jabari, saying that he was the actual person attacked, and she was arrested by the police, but then Manhattan prosecutors declined to pursue the case. So the defense has asked permission to be able to refer to her having been arrested, and that decision has been deferred by the judge. He will make a decision on that. Another big thing that was brought up is prior acts, and a specific case. There's some documents that have been sealed that have been put into evidence. Media is trying to get them unsealed, but the defense is trying to stop that. And there's one particular piece of evidence that they're trying to stop from getting unsealed because they say that it would prejudice any potential jury pool against the defendant and make actually getting an unbiased jury impossible. We don't know what that evidence is. There's no real hint at it other than it's an incident that took place. But what it was, we don't know. The judge took that to a private session, took everybody out of the gallery and made basically it was a private session, and that went on for about an hour before bringing the spectators back in. And they started talking and giving instructions to potential jury members. There's a 40-member jury pool. They're going to end up picking 6 jurors and an alternate from there. But the judge has decided that, or has announced that he will rule tomorrow morning on whether or not the evidence will be unsealed. And it's pretty obvious that if it gets unsealed, then the media is going to announce it. And if it is prejudicial against him, that is, what they're worried about. So we'll probably find out very quickly about that. Also, jury selection and interviewing the jurors will start tomorrow morning. So today was really kind of getting the pre-trial motions in and getting things started. So it's interesting. Majors shows up at court with the same 3 things every time. A coffee mug, not sure why, a Bible, and a notebook. And he carries all 3 of them with him. And when he sits down, he takes his sunglasses off. He puts them in the coffee mug. But, I'd kind of be curious what the coffee mug's for. Maybe he just, wants to have the mug so they can't get his DNA. I don't know. There's a lot of Law and Order stuff in my mind about that, but we'll see. But we'll find out more tomorrow after the judge rules about that. Triple B says a gag order. What is this? The Idaho 4 case? Supposedly there was an incident over in London when he was filming Loki. We don't know what the incident is, but supposedly just, he was never charged with anything over there, but whatever it is, they consider to be prejudicial. So, all right, let's move on to another story here. People are suddenly very nervous about the upcoming Madame Web movie. And by nervous, I mean they're thinking it might suck, which I know is totally a surprise since Morbius was so good. And Venom has been just amazing. So Sony obviously knows exactly what they're doing. So it would be a shock for Madame Web to be bad, wouldn't it? But the reason people are a little concerned is it turns out, speaking of Morbius, that the writers of Morbius were the ones brought in to do this movie. Matt Sazma and Burke Sharpless wrote the screenplay for this film, for Madame Web. Now, I know you can look at Morbius and go, okay, it was not a very well-received movie, but, these guys obviously have done other movies, right? This can't be the first movie they ever did. Well, you're right. They did other movies. They did 2014's Dracula Untold, 2015's The Last Witch Hunter with Vin Diesel, 2016's God of Egypt, and none of those were considered good movies. And they also wrote 2017's Power Rangers, which is kind of controversial at best and is not a hit. But on the plus side, they did create the Netflix Lost in Space series that everybody seemed to like. So hopefully they kind of rechannel the Lost in Space stuff, but we shall see when the movie comes out, right? Okay, let's move on over to Bob throwing Bob under a bus. Bob Iger, the returning and current head of Disney, just over a year after returning to being the CEO, was commenting on the former CEO, Bob Chapek. And he said publicly that he was dismayed about Disney's performance under Chapek's tenure. Iger, who of course selected Chapek to be his replacement, Chapek being the former head of Parks Division, well, Iger said that he was disappointed in what he was seeing in the transition period, and was, while he was out, and he worked hard to distract himself from it. That's never a good sign if you're distracting yourself from what your predecessor, not your predecessor, but your hand-picked replacement is doing. But he added that he will definitely exit as the chief executive when he so at the end of 2026, his extension just got extended again. At the end of 26, he will definitely lead. Successor, thank you. JD says, I mean, those guys are great, but they should. Oh, you did not invoke his name. Anyway, so if you're curious what was so bad about Chapek's run, Chapek was the guy behind pushing Disney Plus, pushing everything to Disney Plus, wanting more quantity rather than quality. And he was the guy who basically caused the feud between Disney, Marvel, and Scarlett Johansson by throwing Black Widow up onto Disney Plus and not offering to compensate Scarlett for the loss of income that she would have gotten had the movie had a full theatrical release. So, yeah, nobody misses Bob Chapek. Nobody. Okay, let's move on. And this is going to seem like kind of a weird area for us to dive into because we tend to do comic books and superheroes and pop culture. But I also love cooking shows. So when there's a good cooking show news story, I like to cover that too. And we've got one. We got Guy Fieri. He has signed a new 3-year deal with the Food Network, which sources are saying is valued at more than, get this straight, $100 million. That's a lot of flame-covered bowling shirts you can buy. Now, this fresh deal means that Fieri remains as Warner Brothers Discovery's the cable channel, the Food Network's highest paid talent, and of course is better than his last contract, which he signed in 2021, which was for $80 million. Now, of course, Food Network and Warner Brothers have declined to comment on this because I'm sure they don't want anybody going, really, Guy Fieri? But under the new agreement, Fieri, which will actually make 20 years on the Food Network, he will continue to produce more of his series Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, as well as Guy's Grocery Games and the Tournament of Champions. So expect a lot more Guy Fieri on your television, which is probably better than him standing outside your window, gazing in, trying to figure out if you have the proper food ingredients, kind of weird. Yeah. What would Guy Fieri do if he didn't have Food Network? Would he go back to running his restaurants, or would he just sit around and cash paychecks from the restaurants? And Anyway. So Zack Snyder is done with superhero movies. Back to the number of the tips that could frost. Absolutely. Thank you. I knew I was missing the obvious joke. So Snyder says he is done with superhero movies. The filmmaker behind Watchmen, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and of course Justice League, said in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter that he no longer feels an excitement towards the genre, and that even though he says he's done, there are a couple projects that could still happen if DC or Marvel were to call him. Like if James Gunn were to invite him to be part of the new revamped DC universe, Snyder would be happy to adapt The Dark Knight Returns, but only as a true representation of the iconic Frank Miller graphic novel. And with Marvel, he would happily take on a Daredevil and Elektra movie as long as they were adapting Frank Miller's Elektra Lives Again. Otherwise, he says, no, I'm done. We've been on the treadmill. It has not evolved. I don't have the excitement that I used to have. So it is kind of interesting that the guy seems to want to he's focused on Watchmen and Frank Miller's story, Alan Moore and Frank Miller. So you can see why all his movies are kind of this deconstruction of superheroes, because that's what he seems to like. So, okay. Anybody who watched Ahsoka, there was a lot of people who were very worried about Ahsoka's cat that got left behind, the Loth cat. Well, don't worry. Dave Filoni knows you're worried about the Loth cat, and he wants to assure everybody the cat is just fine. Now, he was talking to the Dagobah Dispatch, and he said, I'm a pet owner. Of course I know what happened to the cat, but it was amazing that all the things of the galaxy to be concerned about, the fans are concerned about the cat. It's totally fair. Filoni went on to reassure fans that Merle, the cat in question, is just fine. In fact, he's probably living his best life on his native Lothal, where Sabine is stuck in another galaxy. He says, with the cat, obviously, there's a couple of things at play. First, I think Sabine would leave the door cracked open. Second of all, I think Merle's smart enough to be able to move through the ventilation ducts up and down the tower. I don't think he needs to operate the elevator. I wouldn't question if he could, but I think he could move up and down through the ductwork to get out there, down there to ground level. Maybe there's other lolcats around, and he's not the only one. He went on to say, I don't think that Merle is what I would call a domestic cat. I think it's a wild cat that lives with Sabine, and she likes the fact and feeds it. But Merle knows it's a good situation, so he hangs out. But Merle's an opportunist and probably a bit of a pain in the butt. So the cat's fine. The cat's all good. Just fine. So, all right. That kind of wraps up the news. I will check and see if anything else broke while we take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about all these Fantastic Four rumors and just who Anna Taylor-Joy might play. So we'll be right back.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise. A promise of adventure. A promise of excitement. A promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey. And behind every page, there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today. Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rocket Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
Programming on the EXP is made possible by viewers like you, or your local comic shop, or that Kickstarter you backed, or the publisher you like, or comic industry professionals who want to share a message with the world. Really, anyone who wants to advertise with us can. If you're interested in seeing a product you know and love, or are creating, or are publishing, or are involved with, advertised here on The Experience, and having your message shared with our viewers, please reach out by scanning the QR code below or visiting our website and using the contact form.
You know, sometimes I read the news and I don't expect it to go this way. There's a story that just broke about 10 minutes ago. And it's nothing huge. It's just a casting. But it's somebody that we look at and think, well, he should play the young version of this character, because he looks like a young version of this actor. And instead, he's going to play a young version of a completely different person. So the headline reads, Sebastian Stan to play a young Donald Trump in Ali Abbasi's film, The Apprentice. Now, we've all been looking at Sebastian Stan thinking he should play Mark Hamill. He looks like he looks like Luke Skywalker. You know, you put the right hair on him and stuff. Donald Trump? Sebastian Stan's going to play Donald Trump? He goes from playing the Winter Soldier to Tommy Lee of Motley Crue to Donald Trump? How does that even work? Does anybody see that? Does that make sense to anybody? That's just weird. Donald Trump? And I mean, I know there's people who love Trump, but if you don't, would you want to play him? It just feels like, I don't know. On the verge of going political there, and I think maybe we should just slide back into our main stories. But that's just weird. Very weird. Okay, let's talk Fantastic Four. There has been a ton of rumors ever since the actors' strike ended. Just all over the place. I mean, you know, and there was a ton beforehand, I know. Marvel Studios, you know, finally doing Fantastic Four, and it's going to be John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. It's going to be Penn, whatever his name, Penn Badgley. It's going to be the cast of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I mean, there was just a lot of names flying about. And there was even some just prior that are kind of back, like Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. One of the newer ones, of course, is Pedro Pascal in talks to be Reed Richards. And again, nothing's been confirmed. We know that Matt Shackman is directing it, and that's about it. That's the extent of what we know. Nobody's been officially cast. But some of but the more recent rumors, there's a lot of talk about Cillian Murphy playing Doctor Doom. But the reports saying that are saying that he wouldn't be the big bad for the movie, that he would just be like a cameo and maybe setting him up for Secret Wars or for Fantastic Four 2. And okay. And another one says that Javier Bardem is in talks to be Galactus. And I don't actually, well, and those aren't the only rumors, nor are they the only actors for each role, but two of the even more recent rumors that just came out recently. One is reporting that the Silver Surfer is going to be in the film, but it's going to be a woman. And another has Anna Taylor-Joy being cast as a villain in the film. Now, let's take these last two rumors along with some of the other ones we've been hearing and try to make an educated guess on what's really going on. Now, the reports that had Murphy as Doom and said that he'd only be a cameo, which means that it's possible the main story will focus on Galactus. Now, I'm not a big fan of either of these villains being the main antagonist for the first movie, because you have 4 characters you have to introduce, get us to like, show their origin, or if you're going to throw us into them already being the Fantastic Four, great, but you still have to give us the opportunity to know them and like them. And if you're doing this, do you really have time to introduce and establish characters that are as complex as Doctor Doom or Galactus? There are some lower tier Fantastic Four villains that they could go after. We've introduced Skrulls. We know the concept of Super Skrulls. You could have them go against the Super Skrulls. You could put them up against the Mole Man or the Red Ghost or the Puppet Master. I mean, there's a ton of people, simpler villains that would make sense when you're creating a whole new team of heroes. And these are supposed to, and this version is supposed to already be the Fantastic Four and older and already have kids. So there's even more characters introduced. So having a big villain, a big complicated villain that you got to have backstory, and you don't just introduce Galactus, you introduce Silver Surfer. So you've got to establish Silver Surfer, and you have to introduce Galactus as a threat, and you have to give the history of Galactus. And you kind of need the history of Silver Surfer, and that's just so much to put into a first movie. So I'm hoping they don't do that. But if they do, and if we go with the idea that Galactus is the big bad, then we got to look at that next rumor that the Silver Surfer is going to be a woman. And in honest truth, I think that that's a wrong rumor. And I don't think I think it's probably somebody heard, well, they're going to replace Silver Surfer with a woman. And when you say it that way, and you think, oh, well, they're going to have a woman as Silver Surfer. But it could also be that the Silver Surfer gets replaced as Herald of Galactus by a woman. And that not only makes more sense, it's from the comics. Galactus had a Earth woman who became his herald, Nova. And this would be a great role for Anna Taylor-Joy and would make her kind of the antagonist. So if we did the actual Galactus story that, we know from the comics, where Silver Surfer leads him to the Earth, to eat it, but then he starts seeing that the Earth is a lot like his own home planet, and he changes his mind and is convinced by the Fantastic Four to help betray Galactus and to stop the World Devourer. You end up with Silver Surfer being banished to Earth and not able to surf the causeways or the cosmos, and Galactus needs a new herald. Now, it didn't take place boom, 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 but later on, Galactus does take a herald from Earth, and this was Frankie Ray Nova. So I could see them kind of merging those two things together, giving Galactus this new herald, having Frankie Ray sacrifice herself in an effort to save the Earth. So that said, you guys are probably thinking, well, who the hell is Frankie Ray? Nova is Richard Rider. Nova is Sam, whatever Sam's last name is. He's part of the Nova Corps on, all of that stuff. Well, there was a short time. Well, let's break down who Frankie Ray is. Let's do a little history on this character. And she's got a real convoluted, bizarro, almost problematic history that ties into some interesting corners of the Marvel Universe. Now, Frankie was originally a love interest for Johnny Storm, who basically offered herself up as the herald to save the planet. She first appeared in Fantastic Four 164, which was November of 1975, and it was written by Roy Thomas and George Perez. Now, after several years as kind of a minor supporting character, John Byrne turned her into the Herald of Galactus in Fantastic Four 244. She was then around for about a decade before being killed in Silver Surfer number 75 in 1992. And then I think she was actually brought back in the Heralds Limited series in 2010. So she's got a backstory, but let's break her down even further, because her history really ties into some older aspects of the MCU or of Marvel. Now, in her early life, Frankie Ray's biological father abandoned her and her mom when she was very young. Now, her mother ended up remarrying a guy named Thomas Ray, and she ends up taking the name Ray. Now he's an eccentric repairman who works in this small laboratory as kind of a hobby. So he's repairing TVs or whatever it is, and he comes home, and he's got this little lab he tinkers in. And eventually Frankie's mother passes away, and she's left with her stepfather. And, because she has no other family to take care of her. And her stepfather's obsessed with his lab, so she ends up going down and helping him in his lab. And there's a moment where he hears for the first time about the Human Torch, Johnny Storm. And he busts into a rage. He just gets furious. And Frankie has no idea what's going on. Well, what it turns out is that Thomas Ray is a fake name, and he's really Phineas T. Horton, and he created the first android torch. From the Invaders, we see him in Dr. Horton's Amazing Android in Captain America, the First Avenger. So Phineas Horton also ties into Kang the Conqueror. He worked with Kang back as Victor Timely. So you can see all this stuff kind of pulls together. Now, where was I? This angers Ray or Horton because he created the Human Torch, and person turquoise waving. Hey, Steve. So, and hey, Jay. He decides he wants to fire back up his original Human Torch, so he grabs a bunch of chemicals to head down to where he's hidden the android body. Frankie helps out, but while they're going to this warehouse where Horton has this androids kept, Frankie falls through some of these weak planks. The bottles breaks, and like what happens a lot in the 60s and 70s when it comes to comics, she is doused in random chemicals, and she ends up bursting into flames. But Frankie not only survives the experience, but she finds out she can generate flames on her own body and basically becomes another Human Torch. And can not only that, but she can also control nearby fires. Well, Horton is horrified by this because he's only ever wanted to protect her. He didn't want to turn her into a Human Torch. So he does the fatherly love thing of hypnotizing his stepdaughter to forget everything, forget that she has the power, also to implant pyrophobia, the fear of fires, into her. And he creates a transparent suit for her that would suppress her powers and hypnotically orders her to ignore that the suit is on her. So basically, there's this thin membrane of a suit covering her entire body at all times from being a teenager on. Yeah. But then he wants to protect her from his ghosts, so he abandons her in a way. He leaves her, but sends a monthly check so she can survive. And at age 14, she's basically living on her own, finishes high school, and ends up going on to college and gets a job as an interpreter. Yep, that is done. 70s, yeah. Now, subconsciously compulsed by Johnny Storm, she is drawn to him like a moth to the flame, despite her pyrophobia, and when they meet, they begin a relationship. Now, the new Human Torch eventually becomes aware of this transparent suit, and by becomes aware of the suit, he probably tries to fool around with her and discovers, hey, you've got this plastic thing all over your body. Takes her to Reed Richards. Richards figures out what the suit is about, how to remove it, and also about the hypnotic conditioning. And Sue Storm then convinces Reed Richards to let Frankie join the team as another Human Torch. And she ends up learning to control her powers more precisely than Johnny Storm. She becomes better at it, just not at the same power level. So, but Johnny's a much more powerful Human Torch, but she's a better, more precise Human Torch. Now, this, of course, leads to encounter with Galactus, and he's become weak, and with no other option, he's decided to blow off his oath and return to Earth to eat it because he has no herald. And Frankie decides to save the Earth and, offers herself to be the new herald. And even though Reed, warns her that basically by taking this job, you're going to be taking Galactus around to kill billions of lives, she's like, yeah, I'm okay with it. Let me save the Earth. And she takes the job, and he gives her the power cosmic, as he does with all his heralds, and she, combined with her own powers, becomes Nova, then is basically covered in gold. It becomes a gold version of the Silver Surfer, and has flame powers. Now, over the years, as she's guiding Galactus to destroy and kill billions of people, she starts, and maybe a little bit because of her chaotic upbringing, and she starts becoming hardened to the idea of these people, not really showing empathy for the suffering of others. And included in all of these planets that she took him to, one of which turns out to be Tarnex 4, which was the original throne world of the Skrulls. So she ties into the the Skrull storyline we've been dealing with over the recent years. Now, the Silver Surfer and her become friends at this point, because when you're the Herald of Galactus, it's not like you're just hanging out with Galactus. You're out flying around the cosmos trying to find planets for him to eat, so you run into other people. And of course, Galactus is not there going, no, stay away from him. He's bad news. So they become friends, and Silver Surfer starts to become concerned about her lack of empathy and tricks her, basically, by taking her to a planet and showing it to her and saying, would this be a planet you would take, or would you'd summon up for your master? And when she said, yeah, Surfer goes, yeah, we didn't travel anywhere. We went back in time, and this is Earth. And you basically would be willing to let Earth be sacrificed for Galactus. And there's a point, at one point, she actually wonders if she's in love with Galactus. I don't even want to know about that storyline, but, well, this kind of shakes her out of what's going on. She starts empathizing again and having hesitation about, finding planets for Galactus. And of course, Galactus is like, well, you're no good to me now. Move on. And just tosses her out. He never takes back the power cosmic, though. I always wondered about that. Most of the time, he just kind of leaves them with the power cosmic. It's almost like a going away gift or a severance package. Keep the abilities. It's fine. I can give it to another person too. And he replaces her with this guy Morg, while Nova goes off and just flies around as Silver Surfer's companion. Well, eventually we find out that Morg is just horrible. Oh, thank you, Triple B. Triple B says there's so much knowledge. Absolutely awesome. Thank you. So Morg is just a horrible herald in the sense that he's just feeding him planets like crazy and doing horrible things to people. And he's not a very good person. And Surfer decides to pull together a bunch of other heralds, including Nova, to stop Morg. And in doing so, Morg ends up killing Nova by blasting her from behind. Well, this actually upset Galactus. It turns out maybe he actually does care about his heralds when they serve him, but he just really also needs to eat. But he strips Morg of the power cosmic. Again, not what he normally does. And then the other heralds beat the crap out of him. And then the Silver Surfer entombs Nova's body in a star, and we think, hey, that's the end of Nova. And she does get pulled back in another thing that doesn't make any sense. And I don't necessarily think that's going to pertain to any future story, but yeah, she's kind of an interesting character. Now, we've seen her on the big screen before, though. She's excuse me one second, folks. 45 minutes of straight talking can get you. But she's been in the animated shows. She was in the Silver Surfer cartoon. She was in the Fantastic Four cartoons and stuff like that. But she's been on the big screen. Not as Nova and not as the second Human Torch or the female Human Torch, whatever you want to call her. But the character of Frankie Ray appeared in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Now, she was portrayed by Bo Garrett. And in the movie, she plays a U.S. Army captain. And she's kind of the love interest for Johnny Storm. But they spend most of the movie not liking each other and then seem to hook up at the very end. But Frankie works for General Hager and is part of the search for Reed Richards. And they track him down to the bachelor party. They bring him home from the nightclub when the Silver Surfer attacks, and they force him to find the Silver Surfer. And when he's captured, she's the one that actually locks up the Fantastic Four. But when it turns out that, no surprise, Dr. Doom betrays everybody, she's the one that frees the Fantastic Four and then helps them get out and, go after the Fantastic Four. And of course, is now, her heart has warmed to Johnny Storm. And at the very end, when Sue Storm and Reed are getting married, and Sue throws the bouquet, it's Frankie lined up to catch it, and Johnny Storm blasts it, burns it with a fireball before she can catch it. So that's the live action version of Frankie Ray. Now, it's a minor character in the sense that she hasn't had a big impact in the MC or Marvel overall, but she's been part of big event stories. The destruction of the Skrull homeworld or the Skrull throne world, and also, ties into Galactus and what Marvel seems to want to do with the Fantastic Four. She's got a connection to them. So all of that makes sense. And then you put in the story, the fact that there's talk about Anna Taylor-Joy playing a villain. And if she ended up working for Galactus, she would fall in the antagonist category. And I could also see her being at conflict with the Fantastic Four through most of the movie and then making the sacrifice, because the Fantastic Four does seem to go up against the Army a lot too. So I could see how the character would work. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of Galactus being the villain in the first FF movie, but if that's what Marvel wants to do, then that's what they're going to do. But it makes more sense that they're going to start with the Silver Surfer and then bring in Nova than it does that the Silver Surfer is going to be a female actress or going to be played by a female. It just, that's a huge drastic change that doesn't make a lot of sense. Minor characters like the first Captain Marvel, stuff like that, you want to do a gender swap, things like that, no problem. You want to replace a character, like you're replacing T'Challa with Shuri. That I can see. But when you take a character who has been... Silver Surfer is a popular character. He was huge in the 60s and the 70s. He's had his own animated series. He's a well-known character. He's been in the films. That would be kind of strange. Yeah, they could do it. I don't see it. So I think what's more likely is if they do Galactus and Silver Surfer turns on him like he does everywhere else and gets stuck on Earth, then there'll be some situation with Frankie Ray and she's going to become the Herald of Galactus, and then he'll leave Earth with her. That's how I interpret all these rumors, if the rumors are true. So, all right, let's take another quick break and we'll come back and we'll wrap up the show in just a minute. So,
why was Princess Zelda sad after watching a bunch of YouTube videos? She couldn't find the link in the description. We'll stop if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Click subscribe and click the bell when you do. And thanks for supporting the EXP.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Symphonic verses, Nocturne's romance. A song of romanticized darkness, dreaming death by sleep.
let's see. By the way, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Remember, stick around. We've got comic collectibles, Talk and Treat trivia, and 360 comics tonight. Henri is still off, so we'll have fun with all that. Trouble B says, I think the MCU needs to stop doing the gender change, and maybe people will stop calling it the MCU. I think people are calling it I don't know if they've done that many gender changes as it has. They're just using a lot of the female characters. I mean, most of the characters that are coming out, they're, but yeah, I think that there's this, the MCU thing is basically the whole anti-woke thing. And look, people, Disney and Marvel and DC and stuff, they can make the movies they want. They own them. They can make the movies they want. And you can decide if you want to see them. If you don't like a gender changed character, then don't go see it. If you do, then go see it. If you would have preferred to see Ted Kord as Blue Beetle and not Jaime Reyes, then don't see the movie. It's a good movie. But if that's not your thing, then don't watch it. But DC has the right to make the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle movie or, whatever movie they want. And the audience will vote whether they like it or not with their dollars. Just the bottom line. So, I think Marvel just needs to get back to good storytelling. And, and I do like a lot of the stuff Marvel has done. I think there's just a lot of negativity out there towards Marvel that's driven a lot by social media. So JD says, people like that will stick to their political point of view no matter what Marvel does. Their goal isn't to change Marvel. It's to gather followers. Exactly. They're playing to an audience. The audience that the white male audience that's afraid that they're losing power, that that they have to grasp on to things that they believe they controlled when they didn't in the first place. But again, we're getting political, and I don't want to get political. Marvel just needs to make good movies. That's all. It's that simple. Guardians of the Galaxy was a great movie. I liked Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't understand some of the complaints. I do understand the CGI complaints. But I don't know. I do understand that Morbius was a bad movie. So, who knows? All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. I will be back tomorrow. Again, stick around for all the great stuff we got left coming up. And remember to hit that like and subscribe button. We're like really close to 2,500 subscribers. So if you can tell your friends about us, let them know what we do here, whether it's the talk shows, the sales shows, the live art shows like SketchUp, the trivia shows. We got a lot of things to offer. So if you talk to your friends about comics, talk to them about us. Tell them at your local comic shops, Maybe your local comic shop can start running us in their stores on the overheads and stuff. We'll see. Whatever it is Rex and John do. All right, guys. Have a great night. I will see you tomorrow. Take care.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.